Morning, everyone. We're just going to wait for all the participants to join in. I can see we've got 20, 21, 22 and rising. So we'll just wait a moment just to make sure everyone's in, and then we'll get into it. Okay, great. Well, look, first of all, thanks everyone for joining us this morning. We've got 29 people on the line and an amazing panel of experts and leaders in the space of horticulture, and with a particular focus on digital adoption around Agtech and the use of data. So really exciting panel ahead today. Before we jump in, I just wanted to first of all mention that we are recording this session, so hopefully everyone's comfortable with that. It also means that you'll get a copy of it afterwards, emailed to you. I'm Cal Archibald. I'm a director at Beanstalk. We're an agriculture innovation agency that's dedicated to the mission of using agriculture as a leading force for good in the world. And we really believe that if we can get more technology and better technology onto farms around Australia and around the world, then the world will be a better place for it. Yeah, we'll dig into a little bit more about what Beanstalk does in a moment when I introduce my colleague Grant Gilmore. But first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people over here in Perth, Western Australia. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands which you've all dialed in from today. And it's because of this land that we're all here. I know we're all deeply connected to it through agriculture and through horticulture. So I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connections to this land from all around Australia. This morning's sessions is really about sharing and learning in what is a really fast evolving space in agriculture and in horticulture. I recognise that there's lots of really amazing men and women around Australia who are really pushing ahead in this space, and unfortunately we don't have any women on our panel this morning to represent that. But I just wanted to recognise that there's a huge amount of amazing women who are also pushing ahead in this space, not represented by our all male panel today. Yeah, like I say, we're really lucky to have some absolute leaders in the space to speak to today. And what we're really hoping to do is kind of dig into the weeds a bit and really talk about what does it take to really digitize a horticultural operation. Why would you do it? What are some of the lessons learned along the way, and some of the sort of successes and failures and that sort of thing. So we have, first of all, we've got Neil Delroy from Jasper Farms, or sort of ex-Jasper Farms. Neil has scaled one of Australia's leading avocado orchards, and has really done that in an incredibly disciplined way, around focusing on culture and systems and processes and putting science into practice. And so I know a lot of people know of Neil and know of his work, and so really looking forward to hearing the sort of the how did I do it story from Neil. Great to have you along this morning, Neil. We've also got Peter O'Donnell. Peter O'Donnell's leads the charge at Southern Cross Farms, which is a permanent tree crop manager out of the Sunraysia region. They are one of Australia's largest citrus managers, and also cover table grapes, wine grapes, avocados, and almonds, amongst other things. Peter and his team at Southern Cross are absolutely leading the way in terms of how to run a multi-site operation. They're spread across New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia as well. and are very much at the at the beginning of the journey of digitizing their entire operation to kind of better use all the information they're collecting across all of their operations. So we're really interested to hear your perspectives about why you're going on this journey and that sort of thing, Peter. We also have Jesse Reeder, who's from Costa. Jesse's in charge of the Agtech portfolio at Costa and sits across multiple different crop types. There's 7 different categories at Costa that Jesse's aware of and really hyper focused on 4 of them in particular. But really interested in your perspectives, Jesse, on not just the data and digital piece, but what does it take? What Agtech do we need in the ground to actually get better information that's actually useful and valuable? So yeah, look forward to hearing your perspectives. And Stephen Lynch, who really brings an investor lens, has spent some time on the board of Avocados Australia, on the board of Horticulture Innovation Australia. So has an amazing view of the whole horticulture industry, but more specifically spends a fair bit of time representing and supporting investors to think through buying up new businesses in the horticulture space. So really interested in how data plays a role in that as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us on this panel. As I say, we've got about 36 people dialed in from around Australia. And so yeah, really looking forward to having a wide ranging discussion. We'll have a bit of a chat, and then we'll save 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. And then, like I say, we'll have a chance to follow up afterwards for anyone who's got further questions and that sort of thing. So just to kick us off and set the scene, I'd like to pass over to my friend and colleague Grant Gilmore, who leads the charge for us at Beanstalk in our digital team. And I know Grant and the team have a fair few learnings from looking at lots of different businesses who are on this journey, and thought we might set the scene by just sharing a couple of learnings that he's seen through his time. So yeah, thanks, Grant.
Thanks, Cal. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Grant Gilmore's my name. I actually grew up on a cattle farm, so nothing to do with horticulture. But we did try grow a few potatoes, drastically failed in Zimbabwe. But I lead our digital team here, and I've always loved cattle. So I've worked a lot helping digitise some of Australia's leading cattle producers in terms of digital. And I tried to petition Cal to name this webinar what the horticulture industry could learn from the cattle industry, but he vetoed that probably quite correctly. But I'm going to set the scene today with a couple of lessons learned very, very quickly from our experience doing digital in agriculture, with some pretty specific cattle examples. So I'll share that over now. I'll start by saying that number 2, increase in revenue and cash flows. Try drive towards one of these 3 outcomes, and if it's not hitting one of these 3 outcomes, it's often a bit of fun and games, or it can be seen as a bit of fun and games. And so there's 3 lessons we've learned in trying to achieve one of these 3 outcomes. The first one is this: culture eats tech for breakfast. Digital adoption isn't about your software, it's not about your hardware, your tools, it's not about some fancy new tech that you bring in. The fundamental basis for success of digital adoption is your people. And we've seen this time and time again. And there's 2 sub-lessons within that, is that it's so important to bring your people on the journey from day one. They understand, or even day -1, they understand your business better than any software provider or solution provider will. And they understand the pain points that need to be solved, and they understand how to do that. And it's so important to bring them along the journey from the very, very beginning. Corollary to that, the second lesson in this is that it takes time. Digital adoption and digitization doesn't occur in a month or 2 months or 6 months. it's years until it's done right and it's embedded within the culture of an organization. And that's where the real value comes. When your people trust the data they're seeing, they are collecting it accurately and it's robust, and they're using it, most importantly, to make decisions that actually add value to your business. That takes time. Often we do this over 2 years, depending on the size and the maturity of the business, 2 years to really let it settle from the very beginning. But it can take even longer. The old adage of people, process, then tech, we add one more to that. Process again after tech. It's not fancy, it's not beautiful, but it's so important. Often we come across things where people say, oh, we need better data, we need better data. This problem we solved by better data. And actually half of the time, or more than half the time, the data is there, but the conversation around that data isn't happening, and the digital tools. And it's bringing people together to actually have conversations. It can be as simple as that. Meetings, regular meetings, standard operating procedures around how to operate things and how to make decisions from the data and the tools that you're using, and manuals. So that when people move jobs or new people come in, they can pick it up and they can learn from the people before them and stand on their shoulders. Process is this very unsexy part of data, but it's so important, and of digital tools as well. And the third one, very quickly, is we see this time and time again. People bring in a software solution to solve a problem in their business, and they think that's going to be it. And it's so important to fit whatever tech you bring into the business and not the other way around. I'll give an example. One of our clients wanted to understand their average daily gain on their cattle every month, how much they were gaining. So they would muster them in every month from different paddocks. And it's a large property in the Kimberley. Or a couple of large properties, and we started to do that, and we quickly realized that actually mustering them in took a day or 2 days, or sometimes up to 3 days. Added stress to the animals, and they would actually not eat and lose weight over those 3 days, plus cost a lot from a people perspective. We were doing that to collect good data, but we quickly realized that wasn't the right outcome for the business. So we needed to be able to collect it in field. We found a better top software solution, an OptiWeigh solution that allowed for in-paddock weighing. So we could collect data without actually stressing animals and losing the actually outcome that we wanted, which was more weight on the animals, as an example. So that's the third lesson, is that when bringing in digital tools, when undertaking digital transformation, or when using your data, fit it to your business and don't fit your business to the tech. The other way around. So I'm going to leave it there. Our 3 and 4 panelists actually are far more experienced and will bring a lot more light and insights into these areas. But I just wanted to set the scene with that. So I'll hand over to you now, Cal, to kick off.
Thanks, Grant, and well done. You managed to get some mention of beef and even a case study in there. So you've had your little moment. Yeah, I'd love to kick off by throwing to you, Stephen. I know you've spent a lot of time, not necessarily in kind of one specific business, but through a lens across the whole of the horticulture industry. I'm curious if you can sort of set the scene in terms of what does good look like, and is there parts of the industry that are really pushing ahead, and kind of what's the state of play there?
Sure, thanks, Cal, and welcome everyone. As a starting point, I'm familiar with Jesse's business in Costa. I saw Neil's business, and I'm familiar with Peter's, so there's some context there. If I start wearing my ex-horticulture innovation hat, 40 sub-industries. Horticulture is still a disaggregated industry, inevitably, from small to large, both within sub-industries and across them. I have a fear that in digitisation, a commercial race, as I see it, may actually leave digitisation disaggregated. And I think we've got to deal with, I think Grant made some good points. We've got to deal with the data and the process rather than the issue of what you do and how you do it. And if I connect then to Grant around the people piece, I go onto some large operations and converting the data to usability, dashboards in lunchrooms, whole lot of tools that go with it. So I think there are components, Cal, to your point earlier, when we dig deep. But I think the starting point from my perspective, before I go on later to talk about investments, is the relevance of data. So we do some surveys, and by the way, just a slight correction, my board piece was the almond industry, not the avocado industry. But in looking at the avocado industry that Neil's familiar with, they collect data as an industry every year, as do citrus. Interestingly, Jesse, berries don't. So we have some that collect, some that don't. But that data, the question of what its relevance is, it tends to be large scale, doesn't necessarily understand ages, varieties, planting densities. So as we go to data, and we need to understand it as large investments are made and the industry matures. We now have protected cropping, and I'm doing some work in that, be that hothouses or in the case of people like Costas, the berries in tunnels. And high density. So we don't understand the data pieces yet well enough. But as you go to these high-tech operations, the tolerances are less. So the data becomes much more important. And I think that's what we're seeing, that what we do at the moment and what we do as an industry, and even funded with Hort Innovation, the government, doesn't necessarily allow for this next generation of innovation. Jesse's got a background in Bosch. I visited Bosch, technology company. How do we drive those technologies with its tolerances into horticulture? I think, you know, and I know Neil went international to look at data, and he looks at the mining industry. So I think it's how do we bring all those together, Cal, and get the data we do have, as well as data we don't have in some of our areas of horticulture, to a meaningful end, both the integrity of the data and then that interpretation to grants piece about how people use it on the ground, the operators as well as the managers and the boards, because we're not there yet. There's still a journey to go and some challenges, but we should look at them in a wholesome way from what we've got at the moment, which is a fairly low base in horticulture.
Thanks, Steve. And I might pick up on that point that you mentioned. Neil, you've spent, you know, you were doing this before it was cool, and you've been looking at this space about how to use data better in your business 10 years ago. And you know, I know you're playing around with early access databases and that sort of thing. Can you tell us about your journey to in the sort of data and technology space at Jasper Farms? You just unmute there. Neil, I'll just ask if you unmute yourself if you could.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, look, I suppose I'll put it into context where data fits. I mean, the way we run our business is, number one, we put science into practice. So we try to understand the science to maximise our yields. Our yields were double the national average, to give you an example. So that means your cost base per unit is on the first step is half, right? And we did that by R&D. We actually did a lot of R&D in Chile. We joined a group there. I suppose the second thing was we really had a measured performance culture, and a measured performance culture requires data. So you've got lead indicators and lag indicators. A lag indicator is something like a budget to actual. So you finish pruning, you found out that it cost 20% above what it should have. It's pretty useless to you. Lead indicators are data today. So for example, if we were harvesting, at the end of the day, the person supervising that, I'd have a report at the end of every day, how much we picked, how many bins per man hour, and then I could work out a cost, what it was costing per man hour. But we keep the data in timeless stuff like man hours rather than dollars per kilogram or something like that. So you've got data today. The other thing, I suppose, from the measured performance culture, you know, good systems and processes drive business, and that requires data so that you know you can measure what's going on with those systems and processes. Continuous improvement was another key metric. We'd try new processes, measure the performance, monitor it, and then which requires data, and if that worked, we'd lock it in. If it didn't, we'd retreat and seek another path. And I suppose the other component to that whole thing is building a team. And I can't overemphasize this enough. People work for people. And it's interesting. I've just been at an operation in New South Wales, probably the best underground miner in Australia. And it's remarkable, the similarities. I just finished going through a 62-page manual I wrote in our business for how to run managing an efficient operation. And the similarities in the culture and the people and the teams is nearly identical. You know, the sort of things they focus on, and also the data, so you know where you're going every day. So, and then the other thing I suppose that I totally agree with is that you need to there's no point in employing a management system and trying to fit your operation to that. It's so important that the systems and processes you use fit how you want to run that operation and the data. So we actually we built a lot of access databases ourselves in the vineyards we had when we were doing vineyards as well. In the avocados, we use a lot of Excel with Power BI over Excel for our measure performance culture. Because when we looked at software that was available to do those things, it meant you had to change your operation to fit the software, and that wasn't something we wanted to do. And I suppose at the end of the day, you do that, so you know our yields are double the national average. Our costs are in about 40% of the Australian benchmarking study. So when you look at the outcome, our per unit cost was 20% of the average, and the end result was a business that in the last 6 years of operation, our costs ran at 13 to 30% of revenue. Now, we did have good pricing, but that's the outcome that you can achieve.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I've got some more questions on the actual practical, collection of the data, but I want to throw to Jesse. I saw lots of nodding coming from you when Neil's talking about not letting the tech drive the direction of how you run the business and that sort of thing. I mean, cost is a huge operation. Multiple different crop types and spread out all across Australia. I'm curious how you think about ag tech, and how do you think about that? That sort of at the coalface gathering of good information, and making sure that it fits in with the business rather than the other way around.
Yeah, thanks, Cal. It's a good question, and I'm still working it out. We have some obvious, I guess, let's call them limitations, in that we have this tyranny of distance. So we're spread. So you've got initially your team is spread or fractured. We have multiple crop types. We have things that are flowering and fruiting at the same time from one end of the country to the other. So you've got this constant rolling growth cycle across crops within the business. So you've always got pots that are simmering, then one boils and one goes. So you don't get to just follow one crop through with one group of people and one person. It's not quite that simplistic. That said, that's not code for an excuse. What we've done is we're eating the elephant in bite-sized pieces. So we pick off. We've brought some bit more governance and rigor to how we do it now, to perhaps hone in on your question. And we have a framework now that's been accepted within the business, that it's not new, but it's one that we've decided to employ, which is essentially very much like a funnel that just starts on the farm with the unmet need or the problem that is keeping that particular farm manager or that particular business or that block from achieving what it needs to achieve. And if we start at that end, we get buy-in from those people whose problem that we're solving for. And it's not the reverse of that is you sit at a management level, or you sit in an office in a support role, and you say, that looks good, I think we should do that, and you push it down onto the farms. It just doesn't work. So there's an undertone there of what Neil's saying around people working for people and people buying in and people being a part of a process. And it couldn't be more relevant to this conversation. So we've just finished the development of an ag tech roadmap across the country, across all our regions and categories that I answer to. So avocados, citrus, table grapes, and bananas. We consolidated about 232 problems. I've never been so excited to have everybody else's problems in all my life. And we're now running those through a filter, and we will, because obviously we can't take them all on, and we will look at those based on various metrics, which could be, impact to really shift the needle from a profitability point of view, or make our farms safer, or remove, increase profitability. It could be. So they're the high level things, but when you hone in on them, the individual problem sets could be things about managing alternate bearing. They could be about increasing pack out in a variety. And Once I've got the regions to hone in on what they're prepared to own and stand behind and then support, we then drop it into the next phase, which is probably what your space would call an ideation phase. So that's where we would sit and say, what are the many ways in which we could solve this problem? So rather than just going and grabbing something off the shelf, or the local manager says, oh, we had a rep drop in last week that said this would fix it, we say, no, let's just stop for a minute. And we might come up with 15 ways to solve that problem. And then we just run them into a really simple 2x2 matrix, which could be ease of implementation versus impact, or it could be cost versus whatever. And very quickly, some things will rise to the top. And we say, all right, we've got 3 possible solutions that we've all bought in on and agreed. Now, how can we do that? Is that an R&D component? Is there actually a service provider that could deliver that straight away? Is there actually some learnings from an adjacent industry where there's actually no tech involved here, but it's a way of thinking, or it's better agronomy? And so we'll look to adopt it in that way. And then the step after that is pretty logical. It's trial / proof of concept. You would move it into that phase, a very clear set of objectives, what you're trying to achieve, how you'll assess it. Is it user experience? Is it an improvement in, is it more accurate? Is it more cost effective? Whatever that is you're assessing. We have a committee that would sit behind that, again, which is built from the original person who said this problem needs solving. We would assess it in that particular timeframe, 6, 12, 18 months, depending what's required. And then you'll either do 1 or 2 things, and I'll wrap this up because it's a fairly long-winded answer, but you will either, if it was a failure, you'll assess, I won't call it a failure, let's say it didn't meet expectation. You'll either scoot back and say, what was solution 2 and is it more appropriate? And was there an issue? Could be something as basic as what we were told was going to work. Maybe we were sold up the river and it just didn't deliver, or perhaps our assessment of it being the right solution was incorrect. So we can go back. Or B, we recommend it for more broader acceleration, likely more funding, and B, that's where that scaling piece comes in. So we won't just do it in block 1, we'll do it in blocks 1, 5, 9, 7, and 10, or we'll do it in all citrus and mildura, or we'll actually now extend it. So you're extending this out in a measured way such that hopefully you trip over less, you bank more winners, and you give, and in my organisation, we give those people right through, all those stakeholders, some confidence in the way in which we're assessing our investment into agtech.
Thanks, Jesse. Peter, I know a lot of that's going to resonate with you. I mean, you've been thinking and acting on this, for a fair while, and you're on the journey to better agtech adoption and better use of data across your multiple operations. I'm curious about, or if you can just kind of paint the picture of where you're at on that journey, and any learnings or kind of false starts that have been that you might be able to share as well.
Yeah, thanks, Cal, and that was great, Jesse. It was. I'm surprised you haven't already filtered it down to 232 problems. I feel like there's probably been more than that, but that's a great start. I love the idea that the conversations have been around that it starts on the farm and it's got to finish on the farm. So unless the problems are clearly identified at farm level, particularly the buy-in at the start, unless the solutions can be implemented at farm level at the back end, the whole circle doesn't work. So I think that's a great lesson that everybody's sort of already alluded to. Find the right problem as well is one of our great challenges there is that there's a lot of problems there, but we've got to fix the right problem for the right outcome for the farm, for the location, for the people there that implement. We've had lots of challenges and a lot of learnings there and a lot of missed starts. And I'd say that the big mistakes we made early is trying to find that software, particularly around farm management software, trying to find software that fitted our organisation. And then we've had probably 3 false starts with that regard along the way. So I think what Neil said particularly, and Jesse there is, don't let the tech drive you. I think we all get half a dozen phone calls a week through our organisation of a new tech piece, a new fertiliser, a new application, new machine, a new way to look at imagery. We just need to really start with the problem first and then look for the tech behind that. So that would be my best advice. Big mistakes we've made is to get excited by new and shiny.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I want to dig into that and sort of just geek out on that a little bit in terms of it's easy to say let's choose the right tech, but it's pretty overwhelming. There is so much out there, Yeah. Anyone from the floor? Yeah, Peter, Neil, Jesse, how do you think about choosing the right tech and making sure that because it's a long-term commitment in a lot of cases. Yeah, how do you think through that?
Yeah, I might just kick it off and then throw. I think there is a tsunami of tech out there at the moment. It has escalated so much in recent years. If you assume that you can find a number of providers that can solve the problem, let's say you've gone through that process in the first place. I think probably as we think about our tech solution, make sure that that tech provider has a vision themselves about where they're taking their software or where they're moving forward to, because we will want to grow that tech in some way. If they don't also have that growth trajectory, that they've got resources and R&D budgets and development people behind them to take their tech to the next level, then we're just going to be either held back by them or we're going to go and try and find other solutions. So maybe just one advice, and I'll throw it out. The others is make sure that tech company has a growth plan as well.
Yeah, I'll grab one comment and throw to the other guys. It's a really interesting position we find ourselves in, because we've still got very much an immature emerging space in ag tech. Like, as busy as we might say it is, and no question, you just got to read where the money's flowing and look at all the numbers. But you're still dealing with a lot of young companies, startups, very well-intended, passionate people, but in a lot of cases still haven't even settled on the direction they're heading. It's just that might be where they're at the time. They're built off an industry that encourages you to pivot and change direction and focus on what works and what your customer base needs. And so that can bring a level of, for some people, some uncertainty as to whether they're the right people to partner with. And I think when you're looking at quite significant investments, you have to look at those things and say, what's that team look like? Are they working with us? Are they constantly pressing the flesh and asking us if it meets our needs? Are they absorbing our feedback on features we might want to see in dashboards? What does tier 1 support like? What does tier 2 support look like? We have a lot of international solutions that currently are available to us, and there's some real challenges with that. And it could be something as basic as a picking platform, that lands but is supported out of Italy. And you got to say, well, what happens when I just removed ladders from 2,000 hectares of my orchard and the thing goes down? I have 10 of them go down at the same time in the middle of the road. What does that mean? And what does support look like? And I'm not just trying to pick on that as an example, but support the relationship. We probably take an approach of a little bit more slowly, and make sure that we spend more time perhaps looking at what they do, how they engage in other industries, be more thorough on the trial piece. It's just there's a courting process.
Cal, I made the similar comment earlier about not letting the commercial driver of the digital company drive the process. It comes back to that earlier comment of Neil's, I think, of starting on farm. And what I see from Jesse's comment is the companies, particularly big companies, as Jess says, who can do research and afford it, looking for a solution that covers a whole lot of issues. So if Jesse does have his 200 and whatever number of problems, I think in this, as we describe it, this early stage, you've got to be careful trying to find one package and then linking them all in one go. Maybe you've got to compartmentalize the priorities, and you may still have two different bits of, let's call it software, two bits of digital initially to do quite distinct things. You've got the technical piece on the farm versus Neil's COPs and financial piece. So if you try and run too fast and bring them all together and get a software writer to link them all, then you're creating a solution that only a Bosch or a BHP can afford to stick a heap of people in a room and deal with. So I think you need to have a stepwise strategy to this, which is going to take some years as the whole space adapts. The concepts are there. We know they're all dealt with in the other industries, but it's the adaptation. And on farm, you've got all the other noises going on around you, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but I think be wary about trying to package it all into one solution. That's my take of all of that.
Yeah, great. Stephen, while we're on you, I'm curious from I mean, you spend a lot of time advising investors in terms of looking at oversight of existing operations and getting better insight into how they're running and what are those metrics that are most interesting to them, so that to get, you know, to make sure that they've got visibility of how things are tracking. But then also, you know, I know you spend a lot of time advising on the kind of buyer side, looking at new acquisition of new horticulture assets and that sort of thing. From that lens, yeah, how is data playing into it in terms of, yeah, like how are you using data, or sort of, yeah, what's happening there?
Sure. Well, it's an opportunity and a challenge. I was just thinking before, and I don't know the number, but I know some of the large scale players, they're both Australian and international, as everyone will know on this. You know, we would have somewhere, as a super broad range, between $5 and $10 billion of large scale money, if you like, that's been invested in this sector in the last whatever, and it's going to keep going. And inevitably then you also get some turnover. So this is going to be a growing continuum. When we go into an operation, irrespective of the size, and I've been in large, small and very large, we're always chasing the data first. I think Neil made the point earlier, or it might have been Grant, you know, you've got the management, the people in the field and the management, and then in the case of the people I deal with, you've got a board as well. So the relevance of the data and the nature, you bring all that intense data up to a presentation, let's call it in a dashboard, that a board can be satisfied about all that, those dig down 290 pieces of Jesse's. I think that's a key. And inevitably, and I deal with a lot of different experts, be they the engineers, the agronomists, the financial people. Inevitably at the moment, we're having to iterate a process of satisfying ourselves as best we can about the data, with a lot of disclaimers. So it's without being rude to our own industry, it's kind of all over the place. So Neil talked about cost of production and profit. At the end of the day, that's the driver. That's why people invest in our sector, along with food security, water, sovereign security in Australia. So they all go together. But so you've got that financial element, which is ultimately what, let's call it, an investor, and the costers as an investor, you know, needs to look at. But I think the other elements that are coming into it, which I think need to be on the table as well, Carl, is that these people also have a high demand for compliance, let's call it, and you need data for that. So there was a comment about processes, and Neil talked about all the different his reports and so on, but standard operating procedures and policies and procedures, that might sound, what's that got to do with the data? But ESG is a terminology that everyone has to deal with. You must have an ESG report if you're a large investor, as well as all the other, you know, climate change, ESG, they all need data. So to come back to my point, we're grasping for that data at the moment, and we're iterating. And I'm trying to compare costers with business B and so on in some sort of quasi benchmarking way. And it is all a little bit cumbersome at the moment. So again, it comes back to my comment about the journey and the steps. The more we can bring this together on a mission over time as an industry, the better that is for us. And even in terms of this international stage and trying to export and the whole, you know, if we take that agricultural aim for 100 billion and the horticultural aim for 30 billion of GVP, you will only do that and do that safely now, and with barcoding and expectations about the source of provenance. It's data. And so the people writing those checks at the top end need to at least know from a board level dashboard that underneath that there's a powerful, safe set of data. And that's the pressure that's on people like me all the time, is how good is the data you're giving us? And there's obviously a whole mix of answers to this multi-dimensional matrix of data. And we've just got to keep driving to that end, you know, in a consult. You look at Neil's business or Jesse's business or what Peter deals with, there's data there. It's how do we bring that together in a fashion where it's usable to that end point.
Neil, you have scaled a business from you know, almost nothing through to the point where some of these groups that Stephen's alluding to, you know, ultimately took over the business. What do you wish you knew at the start of that journey? I mean, what if you could go back? Like, what would you tell yourself 10, 15, however many years ago it was?
I think, I suppose what I'd say is that we've already spoken about people. That's people and culture is number one. But I think systems and processes drive business. And within that, its lead indicators are the key things that run the day-to-day operations, not lag indicators, budgets to actions, because that's all history. It's not going to drive the business. And one of the good things about data and technology, I think what's happening, especially in corporate agriculture, technology is overcoming a lot of the barriers to running corporate ag. I mean, corporate ag has traditionally been a graveyard, but what a lot of this technology and data is doing is it is enabling to run at a corporate scale because you have good data that you can use. I suppose that's the key thing for me, and it's just been systemized. I mean, it's I think Jesse, I think you're talking about systems of how you go through things. When we used to use an acronym called FADE, FADE, and focus on what the issue is, analyze it, develop a plan, execute the plan, and monitor the result. So it's a circuitous route. So focus, analyze, develop, execute, and monitor. And that, I think you can apply that just about to anything you're doing. And if you're going to use data is just another tool. It's just a spanner looking for a nut to put it on. And if you've got the right nut, if they fit, you use it. So in summary, I think it's just a journey and of continuous improvement and learning is reality.
Thanks, Neil. And Jesse, you've got so many different types of businesses, and to pick up on Neil's point there, they're all, like you said before, at different points of that journey. But at the end of the day, you've still got requirements to report that sit across all of them. So I'm curious about how do you manage the tension between some businesses being potentially more progressed and having data and everything and ag tech at their fingertips to be able to make better decisions, and others kind of still on the journey. And like, how do you think about that across a complex operation like Costa?
You told me before I came on you were going to ask me a few easier ones of this one. It's incredibly difficult. I think one of the first things we've put in place, this will seem incredibly elementary, but we had purposely developed a decentralized business. So that was the intent. That was what was built. There's GMs in each category, P&L responsible, away you go. But the biggest missed opportunity is knowledge transfer, learnings from mistakes, successes, wins, how to, in what, to be fair, when you break it down, some pretty similar crops. Appreciate when you get into the nitty gritty, they're different, but there's a lot of base knowledge that could be transferred. So when we brought together trees and vines, which was those 4 crops that I mentioned before, one of the greatest things we could do there was to then kick off a continuous business improvement group that would sit down and tackle topics that had relevance to all of them. And it could have been about, this pretty boring stuff, but because we've got to get the 101s right first before we worry too much about the sexy stuff. But it could have been about spray drift or spray volumes, or managing a particular pest, or how are you doing your mating disruption? Because it's sort of, well, how are you finding this product? And I used to get off a call with the Avo guys and get on a call with the citrus guys, and it's like, I wish these guys would chat. They're sitting they're only sitting down the hallway from each other, And so that was the first thing to overcome. I think we've done that reasonably well now, and we're starting to see that flow through. And what that's also allowed me to do is, and to be clear, horticulture is not heterogeneous. There's not just one thing that you just roll out across all your categories. However, it's allowing us to tackle significant problems like cost, availability, retention of labour. And do we have tree crops where we're picking at similar times, and can we share labour units? And is there ways we can do, assist with that labour challenge or that harvest challenge? So I think we're doing that fairly well, but I'm really conscious that I can't come up with these one size fits all solutions. So we do compartmentalize when we're looking at solutions for each category.
Stephen, I can see you've got some thoughts there as well.
I think just Jesse's comment relates to a comment/question that Carlos Damsky's asked about remote, how we deal with the remoteness. Mining companies are remote, but they've got solutions. I think it's a good question, and I've seen this a lot. I know one business where they've had to go and erect their own towers at high cost to be able to use sort of robotics and remote vehicles and so on, which is related. I think my answer to that question, which relates to what Jesse says in dealing with his managers all over the place, is that it's an evolving process, but the technology even on that, which will help us, is coming fast. So I travel all around the remote areas. Telstra, I don't want to be an ad for Telstra, but they're offering me a solution which actually goes away, for instance, from NBN to a solution that can allow me to download data, operate computers in a whole range of locations. I think in a very short space, we're going to, and satellite technology, yes, the old satellite phone at $3 a minute. I think we've got to keep going. I think those things will come at us quite fast, hopefully. It's a good question because we don't have a perfect answer yet in remote locations, but I think we've got to assume it will come and it will catch up with us very quickly because they're ahead of us generally in the technology communication space. That's my thought because it relates back to Jesse's point.
Thanks, David. We might shift into some questions that we got coming through. Got one here from Murad from Optomni, asking around. We talked about how they're looking for advice for sort of companies that are on the journey to try and make sure that they're providing a valuable solution to hort businesses, and not forcing them down a certain path. Recognizing that all businesses are different, and so just any sort of mentoring or guidance from how to think through, making sure that they can provide a solution that's flexible and adaptable to what you guys need.
I'll give 2 seconds and then maybe we throw to Pete. And I'm aware of these guys and they're doing a fantastic job, and it's just nice to hear that they're continuing to ask the question because I think there's half the solution, right? Or half the answer to the question. There's a reason, and I don't mind if you do or you don't buy into it, but there's a reason. If you read something like the Lean Startup, they talk about doing 100 interviews, that qualitative side. Now, 100 is an arbitrary number, but what it is the more you go back and ask people or your prospective customers what it is they want, the more you start to pick up themes and trends. That's ultimately what that story is about. And you might start to see that emerge at interview 38 or interview 72. That's a little bit irrelevant, but that will hopefully help you avoid creating bespoke solutions, which I think was in the question, because that does get expensive and you start to customize dashboards. So hopefully if you cast your net wide enough and understand your audience well enough, you'll pick out some themes and you'll own those spaces, and you'll do that well. And in time, as your team builds or the opportunity for those other opportunities continues to build, you can start to offer them. But I would say just keep sitting with people, keep asking. And one of the nicest things we're seeing with one of the service providers we're dealing with at the moment is, like, we're doing that every 2 weeks. And we were doing that before we even agreed to try the solution. We're just in there pressing the flesh. They're talking to us about it. They're telling us about the roadmap, but this is what they do well. They're not claiming to do things they're not, but they're communicating with us where they're going. And that builds a story of confidence for them that we're validating it. So they're going to continue down that road. And we're also got confidence that we know where they're heading.
I'm happy to dive in that too, Cal. And that's a really good response from Jesse. I suppose ask the questions of the right people in the organisation as well. So I'll go back to my comment earlier that shiny can attract people a lot. So it's got to be an application that fundamentally and ultimately is usable at all levels of the farm. So ask the right questions of the right people and make sure it's the big problem. Identify the big problem of the farm, and if you're a tech company, you don't want to have to customize or bespoke anything. Then you've got to come up with a good solution to a big problem that has a lot of applications across a lot of organisations. So focus on those big problems.
Yeah, great, Peter. I know just to drill into that a bit. I know that you've been really diligent about looking across your whole business and trying to be really clear about surfacing what are the challenges. And Jesse spoke to a similar process of identifying challenges and working through them to prioritize them and essentially create a bit of a roadmap in terms of where to from here. I guess that's the other side of this coin in terms of Hort businesses being ready to put forward what their challenges are and create easy grab handles for startups looking to solve problems for them. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and sort of what that was like for you guys?
Difficult. So going back to, I think Neil's very first point was around the culture and getting the culture right. When you have a lot of locations across Australia and a lot of different commodities, and you recruit people from different spots and other organisations, there is massive cultural differences across the organisation. So given a layer of find out what the right layer of buy-in across the organisation at a cultural level that if we're going to make some applications of some tech or some process, it's going to have buy-in across the whole place and not just on 3 farms and not on 10. Because otherwise it's just not going to work for the wider organisation. I think that as we worked our way sort of through it, we think we're gathering a lot of data now. But it's about gathering the right data and acting on it with a good solution. And I suppose the complexity of the data we have at the moment, and without giving you guys a plug, but we're working with you gents at the moment and Lindley around a dashboard where we have a lot of data, but one point where the data can be viewed to assist decision making by the managers on farm and also investors of view, and I'm sure the other guys are involved in that sort of process as well. And there's also the idea that there's tech that will solve a problem really quickly and implement quickly. And I'll use maybe one really simple example is boosters for internet in our cars. We drive across the Riverina a lot, and you can't make a phone call or if somebody drives over alone, you don't have any connectivity to your people at all on that drive. All our cars have boosters now. We feel they're safe. They can contact us really simply and easily, but it was something that was so obvious so straight away that sometimes it's obvious, do it and implement it quickly and don't look back. When it's there, it's there. Make the intuitive decision sometimes.
Hey, Cal, I just saw in the question there, just the last quick bit from the Optometry guys, I'll just quickly answer to, which was sort of around what does that engagement look like?
Sure.
Would you rather the higher touch or perhaps something was sort of sandboxed and pulled across the side and a little bit more passive? That's an individual business response. You probably get a different one right across the panel here. I'd rather take less on in our business and have higher touch on it personally than be scattered and be like, yeah, okay, come back to me and have this thing working in the background and I get an email update or something. It's high risk for failure on integration or adoption. And so would much rather someone's pestering me because they want to have a weekly catch up on how we're seeing it and how it's rolling out than that.
And Jesse, does that for you guys look like a particular orchard or business unit that is spearheading the adoption and that you've got a bit of extra capability around to adopt things first and then roll it out from there? Or are you sort of looking, is that more kind of dispersed across the business?
No, you're spot on. The biggest risk to my role and how I guess it being impactful is I come back to that, having a local owner, champion, sponsor, call them what you will, that buys in and says, I'll come on this journey with you to embed this into our region. And so I do strategically pick my battles, or that's code for pick my people. And if I've got someone says, yeah, I'm on the same page, I believe in this, I agree we need to solve for it, I like where you're going, I like what you've presented, you hone in on those, you wrap them up and you don't let them go and you work with them. And then you use those guys, because our farm managers like to hear from other farm managers. So you talk about, this is into that discussion of who influences who and who's the decision maker, who's the buyer, who's the payer, who's the saboteur. You work your way through that persona piece. And it's important that I know who all those people are. And I get one. And when I get them, I then slowly pull them through and say, hey, Brian, I want you to talk to Michael because he's had a really good experience, and we case study it and we try and pull it across. And that de-risks the tripping over component that we sort of speak of. So I can't just spread it thin and spread it wide. We do it quite as a stepwise change, even within a category.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jesse. We've talked about a lot of the kind of learnings that we've all had along the way, and kind of we've talked about, I guess, what you guys have all been through to get where you are today. We've got 5 minutes left. I'd love to sort of just think a little bit about the future and just go around the group and get a perspective of kind of the technology or the advancements in sort of data and ag tech that's getting you most excited. You can be as creative as you like. You can take the timeline as long as you like. We can talk flying cars, or we can just talk, better reception. But maybe Neil, I'd love to start with you if you've got any thoughts. What are you most excited about? And maybe just flick off mute. You just unmute there, Neil.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit in line with what Peter was saying about communication and having good access to communicating between yourselves. I totally agree with what Peter's saying. We did exactly the same thing. Communication is probably an incredibly important thing that people underestimate, and we did a lot to get better data. So I'd suggest, Stephen, the solution to some of your data problems is get Starlink. These LEO satellites are going to revolutionize ag, to be able to get data in quickly, timely, and then to be able to communicate with one another effectively. I think in a nutshell, that it's probably one of the most important things in agriculture to overcome a lot of the barriers.
Neil, could you just give us a 20-second what is Starlink for those who don't know?
Well, low Earth orbit, it's Elon Musk's low Earth orbit satellites, LEO satellites. So they have very little latency because they're spinning, he's got what, 12,000 or something up there, spinning around the Earth at high speed, low altitude. They have to go at high speed. They pass to one another so that you can get what's the download speed of about 170 megabits per second or something around that. So I think that's going to be, I honestly think some of that stuff's going to revolutionize agriculture, because you can effectively then use a lot of this technology that's out there.
Great.
In a nutshell.
Yes, thank you. Peter, what's getting you excited? What's in terms of what's to come?
Yeah, probably. It's probably a longish list, but I'd love there to be a better crop evaluations technology. We just, I see Jesse not in there. We just got into a citrus harvest this year when there's been to put it mildly, shitload more fruit than anyone expected, and being able to assess that early and crop wise, that makes a lot of differences right down the supply chain. I'm also really interested and excited about. I suppose I'll use the head in energy, but how we utilise waste into bio masses to build. And we have a lot of waste products in our industries, and how do we utilise those in better ways, whether it's through energy or other applications? And then just the use of energy, different energy source, electricity, solar, diesel, whatever it is. What's going to be the future better applications on energy? We're seeing a lot of issues around the world right now, so we need to get ahead of that game.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Jesse, what about you? I'm sure you've got a long list as well.
It's funny actually, because it's probably not as long as you think, and I'll be a little bit controversial. It's because there's not a huge amount that I think I can grab and run with right now. And I say that respectfully, and I'm as big a supporter of this space as anybody. But it was funny because I asked this question in a industry forum a couple of days ago of some panelists. I was chairing this session. I was like, tell me, what's your favourite bit of ag tech you're using at the moment? The first answer was the DPI insect identification app. The second one was WhatsApp, because I can communicate with all my harvest crew. So you get the flavour, right? You get the flavour of what I'm saying, and it rolled down. And one guy was like, oh, there's something about a harvest management app. And it got slightly closer to probably what we're all affectionately referring to as ag tech. So there is a little bit of a disconnect between the adoption and the actual versus the promise and the reality. And I'm, again, not trying to be controversial, but I'll come to your question. We look at it as sort of horizons, loosely, like Horizon 1, 2, and 3. So Horizon 1 things in the next sort of 1 to 2 years, off the shelf available, hitting immediate needs for me now is some things around crop forecasting that we're seeing really, really positive influence in at the moment. I think the methodologies are getting pretty tight and getting repeatable information, but the caveat there is because we've collected good historical data, so I can feed. So sometimes that time when you thought you were collecting good data or data and you didn't know why you were, there's that case, and we're now starting to see that come to life. Horizon 2 stuff, 2 to 5 years, sort of more emerging, immature in nature, but with potential for a bit more step change. I'm really interested in, the waste conversation for sure. We're just scratching the surface there now on inorganic and organic waste streams, and that's massive for sure, particularly in our business. And also I'd say data layering, starting to see some really good stuff where, where we can start to stack soil mapping with tree canopy variability, with, pack out data or colouring data, and you start to layer it and go, now I actually know where my variability is. Then I can start to entertain things like variable rate fert spreading or variable rate canopy spraying. But you can't go and grab those things if you don't have the underlying data set that Neil keeps talking about, which ultimately gives you confidence in that investment. And the last one is Horizon 3, 5 years plus, got to have your eyes on it. Bit more conceptual in nature, probably got a heavy R&D component. And really, you're looking into, for me, that's in our business would be really modern, progressive, simple, narrow, accessible canopies that will allow themselves to be robot ready. Do I think the robots are going to save it? No, but it'll allow us. It's funny thing is you get robot ready, and even if the robots don't come, geez, you've got a hell of a lot better business before you get there anyway, because you've created a system of high pack out, high market desirability fruit that packs out and gets the job done anyway. So that's kind of how I see the phase and the tiers. Yeah, great. Neil, I know you've got some thoughts. I'm really sorry. We're already over time, so I might just have to do the Tony Jones and keep it a bit tighter. Stephen, do you have a one sentence? What are you most excited about?
I'm most excited as an industry that the food security and cost of fresh food is now very high on the agenda. It means we're highly relevant. We've had cheap, easy food. Now, the point of that is that the ability to invest to get it even better is front and center. It needs to be as an investment cost in every budget, not just a cost that's secondary. So you need to, on that question earlier, you need to invest every year for a while to get it right. But people recognise it because there's more relevance in this whole issue around cost of food, food security. I think you bring the two together, and we've got the moment now to invest harder, but you've got to invest over time, not once. Great. In the digital is what I'm talking about, not the overall investment in this conversation. And so therefore today's forum is part of that. Everyone needs to be here for the long haul. Yeah. Great. Well, sage advice and a good note to end on there. Thank you all so much for spending the time to come and share your learnings. I know we could go on for many hours, and I would like to say that we do have, we'd love to run some more of these sessions. So please, love all your feedback. We had 46 or so people dial in, so there's certainly an appetite for more of this, and it feels like we've only just scratched the surface this morning. So thank you for everyone for dialing in. Please let us know what you'd love to hear more about in the future. Everyone who attended will receive an email, and we'll have a link to the session, so you can go back and re-watch it or share it around with anyone who you think is relevant. Also in that, there'll be a link if there's anyone who's sort of on the journey thinking about how to implement any of this stuff in their business. Please reach out. We'd love to have a chat. We're pretty passionate about this stuff, so we'd love to see how we can support. So thanks again, Neil, Stephen, Jesse, Peter. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your learnings and being so candid. Good luck on this continued journey.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, guys.